when the opportunity came along to present a series of classes for some children here in San Jose through this NEA grant, I was interested in putting the issue of the environment as a part of it, because I feel this is a critical issue of our time, the overriding issue, and one that I think the children are aware of, especially in California after 4 years of drought. That would be a good thing to integrate into a performing arts class of dance and theater, but around the subject that's very important and very real to them at this time. One of the opportunities and challenges of this class sequence, which really was a fairly brief time with the children, was to integrate the foundational experiences in dance and acting, voice, and the body with our subject. And I think we did a pretty good job of it first time out. One example, we spent a day where part of the day the kids went outside of the multi-use room where we worked to look at some forms and shapes and textures. They looked at some of the trees nearby. They felt the bark. They looked at plants, whether they were grasses or leaves or some of these little thistle-like balls that were seed pods. And they had a few simple things to fill out. And this gave them a chance to connect issues of form and line and shape with those realities out in the environment, and we brought those in and improvised around those to translate it back into dance and theater, but drawing from a time outside and just putting attention to the things they take for granted because they're walking around them every day at their school site.
We decided to explore it in a way where we asked ourselves a simple question, which was, how does your environment affect the way you act and what you do? If it's raining, you have to seek shelter. If it's a drought, you have to find water. And so we tried to translate this idea of what the environment means to us and how it affects our daily lives and how it affects what we do. And so we translated that, or explored that, and moved that into the realm of both drama and movement.
We were fortunate to have Regan Baumgarten, who is a professional artist who works in costuming and fabrics and sculpture, to come and work with us for 2 days. And she brought materials for the students to make some masks and some simple kind of poncho-like costumes as a way to bring in many natural artifacts that she found. The base of the mask were these palm fronds that served as a hard surface, which they glued moss and grasses and leaves and stones and twigs, and came up with the most wonderfully inventive creations that we let them just go with their impulses instead of saying you have to make a face or you have to make this. And many did make a face, but some did not. And it was wonderful to see them engaged with that and with the materials. This let them access their imagination, which is at the heart of the performing arts or any art form. And from those creations, then we built the latter half of the class in terms of going back to what Jeff said, thinking about their creatures as their imaginary creatures as living in an environment and some of the situations they would encounter in that environment.
So it became a question of using your mask or using your costume, whatever it happened to be, and finding movement that would go with that, finding a voice that this creature would sound like. And then we talked a lot about, well, we put them into groups, and together we said, in a small group, we said, what kind of an environment could these creatures exist in together? Could they live in together? And then we talked about, well, again, how do you act as your creature given that environment? How do you look for food? Where do you sleep? And how do you interact with each other? So it ended up becoming a very kind of creative exploration of them working together to find what they could do with these masks and these costumes.
Each student found some vocal tones, some very muted, some very loud and boisterous, along with ways of moving that were benefited by their costume. We decided to video this because they tended to do good work in small groups, and then when we would want to present to the whole group, they'd get shy, and we understand that. So that was how we strategized to give them the most freedom to explore their ideas. one of our students who tended to be, wanted to pull against the grain, and that's always an interesting challenge, Adelaida, was a tree, which trees, you know, don't move a whole lot at first thought, but she got into the fact of the winds pulling and the tension of the structure pulling against the roots. So however they interpreted it, they did get into some movement material and some great vocal material.
I know my group really enjoyed working with each other and actually really did build off the ideas that the others gave them. I had a couple of young guys who, I mean, they decided on they wanted to be in the forest, but they each wanted to have a little different piece of the forest. One of them wanted to be in a tree, one of them wanted to be in a cave, one of them wanted to be somewhere else. So they talked about that. They talked about what their kind of sub-environment within the larger environment of the forest would be like, but then they also wanted to come together and interact with each other after they came out of their little environment, and to get together. They wanted to go hunting together for food. And so I think the interaction with each other was fun for them, and I think it spurred each other on quite a bit.
Sort of what was intention with this whole project, again, we had 8 sessions total. Reagan was with us for 2 days, and those were predominantly consumed with making the masks and costumes. So 6 sessions, I think we really created a foundation for them to think about dance and vocals and theater. Because that's a huge subject in and of itself, and they started to, we'd see moments of genuine exploration, and they'd tap into their imagination, and they'd be fully with us, and then we would go into the concept, which they integrated as well, but that was like a whole nother subject matter. So I think in the short time that we had to be with them, we really did provoke some experiences that were important and some real thinking about the environment, which is actually, you know, the ultimate goal for this project. The issue of environmental degradation always impacts the poor communities more directly, whether there's a polluting plant there, whether it's a refinery. They have to live in those places that are less desirable. That's not necessarily the case with this part of San Jose. But wastefulness is something, you know, we've had examples here in the Bay Area where various well-known affluent people are ignoring the water restrictions. They're going to water their acre of green lawn no matter what happens. Well, that's an example of sense of privilege, entitlement, which these children don't have the opportunity to do. So to make them aware about issues in the environment is something they're going to live in, they're going to grow into this world that we have to be careful with and do all that we can to deal with that whole issue. You see the joy. Again, you see the goofing around, you know, while you're trying to wrangle it in the class can be frustrating. But when I was making the video, I was cracking up at the things that your kids were doing. And just to have fun, just to enjoy the movement and be crazy and goof up and laugh at each other is really a joyous thing. Just accessing joy is something that there's not as much of that as we should, like in a way that's genuine and simple.